example. You know, you read in Scripture where Stephen was shown a glimpse. John describes heaven, getting a look at heaven, a glimpse. I thought about after Sunday was over with, I said, we had 54, 56 people here, and the house looked full, and I thought that was God giving us a glimpse of what we're going to see in the future with our church. So it was a good day, and I'm glad to be back in the house of the Lord again. Glad to be here for Sunday school. Just a good place to be. Good place to be. I'm going to go ahead and call Brother Mike up here to get us started.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are on chapter 5. And we are at verse 24. I think it can take just a little bit of time. We haven't done it in a while. I haven't done it in a while. Where we remind ourselves of where we've come from so far. The book of Genesis, meaning the beginning or origins. We believe that it was written by Moses somewhere 1446 to 1406, which would correlate between the 40 years that they were in the desert or the wilderness and talking to God frequently every day. It's a foundational book, foundational for the messages that we read in the rest of the Bible, and we've been finding that out pretty heavily in the first 5 chapters. There's been a lot of foundational things we've been talking about. Chapters 1 through 12 are foundational events, and like the creation, the fall, the flood, nations over the course of about 2,000 years. Chapters 1 through 12, and then chapters 12 through 50 are foundational people. It's more biographical, and it covers a course of about 300 years. And so far we've talked about the foundation of good and evil as it's represented through day and darkness and night. We've talked about the foundation of marriage a lot in studying Adam and Eve. We've talked about the foundation of sin as we've already discovered through the fall of man, and especially the consequences that come from the very beginning. There's been consequences. God's shown us the foundation of the seed of Christ as He punished the serpent, and we continue to learn about that, and especially as we're going through the generations, as we started last week, and how important it is to find out how we get from God to the seed and from the seed to us. He's shown us the foundation of sacrifices. He's shown us the foundation of what's in our hearts. The whole issue with Cain's sacrifice was that his heart wasn't right. The way he offered it wasn't right. And so there's a foundation in worship. You can pray loud and for hours on end so that everybody can think you're righteous. But if your heart isn't right, you just wasted your time and you just wasted your energy. He's more worried about what's in your heart than what comes out of your mouth. You can talk God up, but if in your heart you're only doing it for yourself and for selfish reasons, He says, there is your reward. You get nothing from me. So we've already seen that through Cain's transgression, and in the ejection of Adam and Eve from the garden and Cain from the family. We read about the heart of man. So last week we were speaking about generations of Adam. We made it to Enoch. We took care to notice some very interesting words in that verse. And that's one of the reasons why we said that it's important to make sure that we read slowly. Brother Dennis and I were just talking about, if you really want to, there's a lot of cross-referencing that you can do at any one given moment. You can read a scripture and you can find a number of scriptures that cross-reference with that one can provide you with information, or even want you to ask even more questions. So I mean, there's a lot of things that are relative in the Bible, and why we should read slowly and ask for prayer and understanding before we read, so that, it's true, we've said it before, you can read one scripture today, read that same scripture next year, and you're getting two totally different things from it. It's funny that that's just the way that God works. The Spirit will give you what it wants you to know now. You can pray the same prayer over the same scripture. You walk away with two totally different things. You can hear the same sermon twice. I've heard Jimmy McComas give "That Ain't My Dog" sermon. I love that sermon. Probably one of the best sermons that I like that he ever does, just because it's right down my alley, of not owning other people's garbage. But I can walk away with something new every time. So that's just the way the Holy Spirit works. So this morning we start at chapter 5 and verse 24. Actually, we left off with 24, right? So we're starting with 25.
Yeah.
And it says, "And Methuselah lived 187 years and begat Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he begat Lamech 782 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died." Now, one of the things we talked about last week also in Genesis chapter 5 is that this is one of the darkest chapters in the book, because we now see coming to fruition, into being, God's admonition when he ejected Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden, that you will surely die. When he said that, it was, first of all, it was an immediate spiritual death. There was an immediate disconnect between him and God, because he was disobedient. But before that, the plan was that Adam and Eve, there was no death. When we was talking about how he was created in the likeness of God, Adam was pure. Adam had no sin. Adam had no death in his life. He had none of the negative stuff, just like God. Now that he had fallen, he has death. He has the consequence of death. And in chapter 5, we see the death coming onto the scene. People are going, this is about death. And we see that come true. So we see here that Methuselah came and had Lamech, and Lamech then died. And then we go to verse 28, "And Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because the ground which the Lord hath cursed. And Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died." So again, we just like when we were talking about Enosh and how it said, "And Enosh walked with God," we see something different here, because all of the verses are basically the same, where we see a person, and then that person was such a years old, and then had the next descendant in the line that leads from God to Noah, and then we read about that, and then that person dies. As with Enosh, there was something different, and we see something different here when we start talking about Noah, as we see Lamech saying that my son Noah is going to do something for us. And we see him talking, number one, I find it interesting that the Lord had cursed the earth. Now, all of these years later, we are seeing that this person, Lamech, knows about the curse. So that needs to tell us something, that there is some teaching going on. They don't have books and they don't have paper, and they're probably at this point in time not even using clay. Right now, the stories are generational. It's sitting on Grandpa's lap. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you what I did. Let me tell you about the history. And it goes from one generation to the next. So we do see, and that's why we see that, Adam and Eve probably got right, because they knew what they did was wrong, and they knew how they probably felt bad, and you can see about how they named some of their children, and the remorse just in the naming of their children, and what the words meant. But you can see that they've been taught, because they know that the ground is cursed because of Adam's and Eve's activities. They know that that's the cause of that. And he's looking at his son, and he sees this baby, and he sees Noah, and he's like, there's going to be some relief that's going to come from this child Noah. And so I think about the time that this was being said, because we were talking about evil and all the things that are going on in that world, that things must have been pretty bad for them to feel like they need relief in the first place. I think that that's something to sit and have to think about as well. Things were so bad that they even felt like they needed the relief. Why am I going to rejoice in saying this child is going to give me relief if I'm comfortable? Why would I even be thinking that I need relief? I'm okay. I'm not thinking about relief. Their life was hard. Their life was difficult. The sin was all over the place, because these people that we're reading about in chapter 5 are the direct line. And so far, we've seen like Enosh, and we've seen they are the line that is in keeping with their communication with God. So, especially when we're sitting here talking about Enosh, and that he walked with God. God took favor. If you remember last week when I said that I could just picture God talking to Moses, and when he got to Enosh, all of a sudden a smile came over God's face, because he enjoyed Enosh. Enosh enjoyed him. They had a special relationship. More special than anybody else, because they took time to talk about it. If anybody else had that relationship, they surely didn't take time to talk about it. But they did when they talked about Enosh. So, things, I thought about that when I read it, if you, again, having to slow down, because if you don't slow down, you'll read right over that and you won't even think. You won't even take time to think about how different. And then I compared it to today. Things must have been really bad for him to look at his son and say, you're going to bring us relief. Things had to be really that bad, because we wait on Jesus Christ, and we've been waiting on Jesus Christ for a while. And we're going to get into that in chapter 6 too. But I think things are pretty bad now.
Brother Mike, don't you think it's devastating, to us, when we see, someone talk to God, but then to have someone walk with God. He walked with God 300 years.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine that? Walk with God. My.
For 300 years.
300 years.
Yeah.
He walked with God. And then God took him.
Right. So, I know, and I really don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but when I sat here and I was like, man, if things got to the point where we as Christians were looking at our children when they're babies. Now, keep in mind, Noah's a baby, and and Lamech is talking to him when he comes onto the scene as a baby. You're going to bring us relief. The baby can't even understand what he's saying. If we look at our children that way, because I'm thinking, I'm thinking today we're going downhill fast in 2013. And we're going to get into it, but there is some sexual immorality that's going on in these days that are beyond anything that we're talking about. There's some serious problems. The giants. When we really stop and think about the things that they're doing, that's some serious problems. So we're going to get into all that kind of stuff, but I'm thinking things are really that bad. And notice also the years that Lamech lived, 777 years. A lot of people think that the perfect life back in that day was 1,000 years, and that's why Methuselah didn't reach it to 1,000 years, because God didn't want nobody to reach the perfect life of 1,000 years. But there's also a lot of people saying that 777, that's the perfect life. Because those are all heavenly numbers. 7 is a heavenly number. It's a divine number.
Yeah.
And for it to be triple sevens, That's divine life that Lamech has had. Which is also something to note, because now we have Enosh that had walked with God and had a special relationship. We then have his son, Lamech, who lived a heavenly number of years, and now we have Noah, who has come onto the scene. So that's all pretty special. And the last verse of chapter 5 is verse 32. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Shem is actually pronounced Shem, and it means name. Ham is pronounced Ham, and it means hot, and that's actually pronounced in their Hebrew is Yephet, and it means opened. Yephet is the oldest of the brothers, but Shem is listed first. Does anybody know why that is? Because we all know that when we're talking about the Hebrew lifestyle, the oldest, the firstborn, that he's the inheritor. He gets everything. That's just the law. But here we see that Shem is listed first over the oldest. Does anybody want to take a shot in the dark as to why that is? Because Shem is the line that will bring forth Jesus Christ. Shem will be in the ancestry of Jesus Christ. Let's also take note that we don't see Moses says Moses has any other sons and daughters here. It doesn't take time to say that. There's no mention of it. And if that was so, they surely didn't make the ark. So there's a lot of math and stats going on in chapter 5. So let's just do just a small recap of what we got here. Adam lived to see long enough to see Lamech, the ninth of his generations. In the 56th year of whose life he died, and so he died when Lamech was 65, and as he was the first who lived, he was the first that sinned, he was also the first that tasted death in a natural way. We know that his son Abel was murdered, but in a natural way. Of the line that we saw, Adam was the first to go naturally. Enosh was taken away next after Adam. 7 patriarchs remaining witness of his translation. And all the 9 first patriarchs were taken away before the flood came, which happened in the 600th year of Noah's life. And that the flood did not come until after the death of Methuselah, in the same year that Methuselah died. So those are some things that we need to walk away with from chapter 5. And then we go to chapter 6, where we're going to start talking about the flood. And this is getting ahead of me. There we go. All right. So, chapter 6, the great flood. Verse number 1. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Daughters. In that whole verse, we've basically did word studies for everything that's in there, except for daughters, which is bat, and it means daughter, girl, adopted daughter, a daughter-in-law, sisters, granddaughters, a female child, or a female cousin. We start off chapter 6 by being told that some time has passed, and that man has done what he was told, and that mankind has multiplied. Even more so. We were talking about, when we were talking about the death of Abel and how Cain was afraid that people were going to rise up against him and kill him. We did some math, and we're talking about all those thousands of people that could have been born, and that there was some significant population on the planet by the time that Cain was ostracized from the family. We have some more time has gone by. Man has continued to multiply upon the earth. We're told we are not yet talking about whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, just that man is multiplying in this verse. We are also seeing an emphasis on the fact that men had daughters. This may mean that at the time there were more women on the earth than there were men. And we're still stuck to the truth that Genesis is foundational. We cannot forget that we're basically still talking about two lines here. It's important to remember we're talking about lines, lineage. We're still talking about a line of Seth, and we're talking about a line of Cain. Don't forget that, because that's important to keep in mind as we continue on. On the face of the earth, we can indicate that both lines, girls were brought into the world abundantly, and that it is a scene. This is about setting a scene. This first verse about things that are about to come. The story that Moses is about to tell us. He needs to let us know. Time had passed. People are still having babies, and the world is mankind is multiplying upon the face of the earth. So he's keeping the story going. Verse 2, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they choose. Fair is taub, or tuv, and it means good, pleasant, or agreeable. We've already talked about the word son, but there are some, and this is where me and Dennis were talking this morning, there are some who believe that when you see the sons of God, there's some discussion about what that means. There are some that we're talking about fallen angels, that the sons of God are fallen angels on the planet. But as we see in Matthew 22, verse 30, where I was describing earlier this morning, that the Sadducees had a conversation with Jesus Christ. They were questioning him about marrying a wife among brothers who had died, and asked a question about, in the resurrection, whose wife shall she be?
Yeah.
Because she has known all 7 brothers. And Jesus Christ said, Ye do err, not knowing the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but as the angels of God in heaven. But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have ye not read that which was spoken unto you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So what Jesus Christ is saying is that angels don't marry. They're not cardinal. They don't have sex and then have babies. There's a TV show out that is absolutely, well, I don't have TV in my house anymore at all, but it was absolutely forbidden once I started really getting into loving my Lord, and that's called The Supernatural. It's a television show, and it's about the angels. You got Gabriel, you got Michael, you got all the angels playing this part. So we're not just talking about demons. We're talking about heavenly angels, and they're using profanity. They're smoking cigarettes, they're having sex, they're doing all kinds of stuff. And they warp through time trying to catch somebody. I don't know who they're trying to catch. That's not how angels act. That's not how heavenly angels act. They don't insult God. Because if they insulted God, they wouldn't be there. They'd be on the other team. You think about the Archangel Michael. The Archangel Michael, according to the book of Revelations, he's the angel that's going to bound Satan. He's got a job to do. He is what I would consider chief warrior. And one of the things I know about warriors, especially in the army, is the reason that you go through the boot camp and get your brain washed out, cleaned out for you, is because when the commander gives you an order, he expects you to follow it. He doesn't want any argument. He doesn't want any back talk. So you go into the army with an attitude problem and you come out without one. It's a brainwashing. I believe it 100%.
Yeah.
And I believe, I'm to the point where I believe we can really brainwash ourselves if we really want to, because it's not all that hard to believe in something if you really want to. And so I don't think that any of the angels have this thing that they can go against God. I don't believe that. I believe that at the day that God threw angels and Satan out of heaven, they had a choice to make, and they had that choice on that day. What team are you on? And I think that there is no trading deadline. I don't think that there's any waiver wire. I think the angels that chose to go have chosen to go. The angels that have chosen to stay have chosen to stay. So I don't think that there's any angels producing babies and multiplying on the face of the earth. So when we're talking about the fallen sons of God, we're talking about the line of Seth that have intermingled with the lines of Cain.
That's right.
We're talking about sons of God, the sons of Seth, the sons of Adam and God himself, who were along the lines doing the right thing, that saw the fairness of the daughters of Cain and crossed over to the other side.
Yeah.
They started mixing and mingling. What it's saying is that this is a foundation, and we should write this down, because this is a foundation again of marriage. We're past that marriage is between a man and a woman. We've already got that foundation. This is a foundation that marriage is of God. It's holy. It is an institution that is sanctified. You get married in a church in front of a pastor because you are taking an oath, not to the wife, not to the husband. You're taking an oath to God. You're saying, this is my partner. This is who I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. This is who I'm going to give my heart to. And this is who I'm going to serve you by serving him or her.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. That's what marriage is. And this is what he's saying is, you are completely corrupting it. Because you are of Seth, you are of me, you're in my line, and you're crossing over, and you might as well just go out there and marry a prostitute. You might as well just marry the devil. It's called, here is the foundation of the phrase we use, equally yoked. You might as well highlight it, underline it, because this is what that means. When you are unequally yoked, you are crossing the line. If you're raised in God, then you should marry in God.
Amen.
That's it. Vinegar and water doesn't mix. Go ahead, brother. I knew it. But just so you know, I have it right here. Unions are all about God. And again, we're talking about sexual immorality. This is, again, important. I'm going to keep on mentioning it until we get to the flood part, because sexual immorality, yes, we're going to talk about the giants, and yes, we're going to talk about some serious violence that's going on. Mankind is really bad at this particular point in time. But sexual immorality is against God, and it is a chief reason, not the only reason, but a chief reason that he was hurt enough to decide to destroy his own creations. And the reason that I say that, the reason that I point that out, is because I'm thinking about today. Are we having the public displays out in the street like they did back then? Not yet. But we certainly are getting liberal enough to where you might find a tent somewhere down the road where it's offering free sex with animals. Just say it. Because that's what was going on. They were having sex with anything. They didn't care. They had religions going on where that was a ritual. Sex was a part of the rituals. And it was happening in their temples.
Yeah.
And God was like, oh no. No. And again, keeping to my theory that the same relationship that we have with each other, our children, if you are a child, the relationship with your parent is no different than our relationship with God. Imagine you having to sit by and watch your child do something that is harmful to them. How do you feel? Especially when they're an adult and you really can't stop them from doing it. How sad does that make you? How much does that hurt you? And I got to stop talking about that because I actually go on. I know that. I just wrote that down this morning, so I know we're going to get to that in a minute. But we see a foundation. And another foundation about marriage here. And again, another reason why keeping in mind that what we're talking about is these two lineages, these two lines is important, because this is where it's coming from. This is where the corruption of society is happening because of these two lines. I want to make sure I'm covering all my notes. We see that he's sitting here saying that they're taking wives of all of which they choose. Not just one and then being loyal, but if they like the way you look, they're going to take another one. They're going to create concubines. They're going to have as many wives as they want. Marriage is now based on the eye and not the heart. If you look good, I'm going to take you. Basically, that's all they're saying. And if you weren't looking good, I guess you became one of the prostitutes because nobody was going to bother with you. But we see that here. Just in the day, here's another foundation, because you can take this, and we're talking about marriage, but what we're seeing is a civilization that wasn't putting God first. They had completely taken their eyes off the mark. And we've talked about, I know Randy talked about it in his sermon, When the Pigs Fly. I remember it clearly, and it is the truth. That wild man, that crazy man, he didn't get like that overnight. That wasn't instantaneously. I don't believe Charles Manson got to be Charles Manson overnight. He was a baby once who didn't have a thought in his head. He didn't have anger in his bones. He was an innocent baby at one point in time. Somewhere along his journey, he was fed filth. In some way, shape, or form, he got fed some stuff that wasn't right. Garbage in, and then for him, it stayed there. It wasn't garbage in, garbage out. It was garbage in, and then he stewed on it. And then he became garbage. And he thinks he's Jesus Christ. So somewhere, somebody was really feeding him some bad stuff. But that crazy man, he didn't get crazy overnight. And we're seeing this again. Here's the thing, and this is, again, another reason why I'm where I'm at. I'm struggling a little bit with why I'm deciding I've got to cut some stuff out of my life, is because I am on that train right now where I can absolutely understand the theology that if I allow garbage in, I'm going to have garbage out. And I don't want garbage out, so I don't want garbage in. So I am starting to really filter the stuff that I put in to my mind. I'm questioning everything that is going into my mind. And right now I'm uncomfortable. So my filter is pretty thick. Because I am hearing sermon after sermon after sermon about God first. I know we talked about it when we talked about in the book of James and the book of Titus, when they said always. Always doesn't mean when it's convenient for me. Always means always.
Yeah.
You think about God always. That means always to me.
Yes, it does.
which is kind of a struggle when you have to go to work. If I'm sitting there trying to counsel somebody on alcoholism and I'm trying to be serious about that, I got news for you. I'm not thinking about God at that moment. I'm thinking about what referrals can I give you? What resources are in the county for you? I'm thinking about how am I supposed to help you? You know? So right there in that few minutes, I'm not focused on God. So I know for me, always is almost like I can't do it always.
But,
So then I look at my downtime. Go ahead.
but you know, you're representing God at that moment. You're showing love and God.
I am. I'm talking about my meditation. I'm
Yeah.
talking about God is supposed to be at the front of my mind.
But you're also supposed to serve.
Yes,
And you are.
I know. When I'm sitting there looking at my fantasy football, I don't see anything righteous about that, brother. And I'm struggling with that because I know that's really not. I think I'm feeling pretty good. It's not harmful for me. But at the same time, I'm struggling with that always thing because I'm taking that pretty literal. You know, I sit down and watch a Disney movie with my daughter. It's not bad. It's about a princess. It's got some kind of story to it. You know, it's rated G. There's no profanity. There ain't nothing going on. But I am not thinking about God. And I'm not. Say it. This was the condition back then. And there is a condition today that people, inch by inch by inch, laws are not passing start to finish in one day that same-sex marriages is okay. It's state by state, slowly falling like some dominoes, inch by inch. We are getting corrupt. Rust doesn't, bam, there it is on metal. It's a form of oxidation. You have water, you have air, you have sun, you have evaporation, you have a whole bunch of stuff that gets on. And then over time, something rusts out to the point where I can't use it. Brothers, we're rusting out. And I ain't liking it. I'm not comfortable with it at all. So I'm not going to do my part in the corruption. I'm going to do my part to keep my line right. This is where we're going. And I guess my overall point is we got people out there who don't believe the Bible. They don't believe that God's going to destroy us again. He'll come, he'll take his church just like he took Noah. He'll save Noah. He'll say, do this because you're righteous and you're going to carry things on and I'm going to save you. So this is what I want you to do because I'm about to wipe everything out. Well, he's going to come and collect his church. So if you want to be in the church and you want to have, you better get in the church. And you know, there's only one way in the church. Because you can come in this building and live in sin all you want. But you ain't getting into that church. Living in sin. That ain't happening.
Oh,
You can come in here, we'll welcome you and we'll love you and we'll try to get you, we'll try to share with you what we know. But until you do what you're supposed to be doing, you are not in the family. You ain't getting on that ark. You ain't taking that journey. That ain't happening. And I think that the things that is amazing to me is that it's all right there in black and white. From a time where it started, where we were doing good and we were right and we were righteous and we were in the likeness of God, the image of God, and now here we are, violence, sexual immorality to the point where God's heart is heavy enough to destroy the whole planet. And if you can't look at this world and say, there we go again, then you're blind. You ain't right. The first two sentences of chapter 6 of the Great, we're talking about sexual immorality. What was it you said, Brother Dennis, that you were reading that book and that the other countries in the world want to know how to infiltrate the United States? We start with the kids and we start with sex. If we can get them believing that homosexuality is okay, we're going to destroy the homes because there will be no family unit. There won't be any morals. There will be no sense of right and wrong, no loyalty. There's no nothing. because we're destroying your homes from the inside out. We are destroying the United States like cancer. And we're using your own body to do it. Who is our worst enemy? Us. Say what you want about the terrorists. Say what you want about anybody who is of Islam or Buddha or anybody else. I don't care. Talk about anybody else. Our worst enemy is us.
Yeah, south, yeah.
Yeah, Brother Mike, there's a statistic I saw today about Planned Parenthood. If you gave a moment of silence to every life they destroyed since the 70s, it would last 100 years.
What we see here from the very beginning is that marriage is an institution that is blessed by God. That's why we don't want you to use the word when you plan on degrading it. It's an oath that you take with Him. It's a covenant that you give, that you and God are in. It's not just a marriage between you and your husband. It's hey, or wife. It goes deeper than that. You're in a covenant with God. And you can go back on your word to any man that walks the planet. Are you really sure you want to go back on your word with God? Go ahead.
Do you ever wonder why God waited in Noah's day till there was only one that was righteous?
120 years. Yeah, I know why. You want to get ahead of me?
Well, I'm going to give an opinion.
Okay.
I don't know that you may have found scriptural evidence, but I believe the reason he waited until it got to Noah is because once it got to where Noah was the only one righteous left, the line for Christ still had to be pure to get there. And I'm thinking about today. Why is it that you think God's going to wait till there's only one righteous left here in this world today before He destroys everything? I don't believe that. I don't believe He's going to wait that long. And I think that's part of the reason why was because Christ has already came. The line was through Noah's family from after the flood was kept to get there. But once Christ came, from here on out, we're not going to be as lucky as we're not going to wait. He's not going to wait till there's only one, where we can be our complacency.
Yeah.
Of well, there's still plenty of good God-fearing men around here. God ain't coming back yet. Oh, I beg to differ with you.
And the difference is because life isn't going on. There is no rebuilding the planet after this one.
Right.
That's right.
You see,
Because
there's not a need for the seed to continue because this is going to be the end of it. And the Lord said in verse 3, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years." Spirit, the word study is ruach, and it means wind, breath, mind, and spirit. Strive. Again, if you read too quickly, you might want to think that this means that when he says, "My spirit shall not always strive with man," he's not always going to go along with man. He's not always going to support man. But that's not what he's talking about. The word strive means contend with, plead with, to judge with, not the final judgment kind of place, but as you go through your daily routine. God's not going to, what he's saying here is, I am not going to, on a daily basis, keep talking to you about your conduct. I am not going to continue to have a daily conversation with you to let you know that you're out of order. I am done with that. Do you ever get to the point where you tell your child, I've told you this 10 times. I'm not telling you again. God has just told us, I have told you for all these years, I'm not telling you again. I am not going to continue to plead with you. Because again, this is all free will. These men and women were making their own choices. And God's sitting there with his whispers in your ear, the conscience, telling you this isn't right. And you're not listening. Just like he does today. Then he says, for that he also is flesh. Well, flesh is shagag, and it means to go astray, error, commit, or sin. Because of our flesh, because of the fact that we are human, and he's talking about the eyes are a part of our flesh, we're making some bad choices. We are erring daily, numerous times a day. We are sinning.
Unknowingly, right? Brother Mike?
Mm-hmm.
Unknowingly we sin in that case.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Or do we, that would be a question, or do we have a conscience that tells us we sin?
I would say ignoring, not unknowingly.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think that, all right, here's the difference. For me and you, we have a conscience. When we, even if it's unknowingly sin, we get told about it.
Yeah.
Through our communication with
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
you feel it, you get convicted about it, then you go and you do something about it. Okay? Charles Manson, I don't think he ain't hearing nothing. This is my point of when I say when you tune that out and you stop listening, you can't hear anymore. And again, somebody has fed him a line of garbage. What?
I was just going to say, you just got done telling us that there comes a point where he says, I'm not talking anymore.
Yeah.
Done.
I mean, Charles Manson, when you get to thinking that you're Jesus Christ, first of all, somebody has misled you into what the Scripture says, because Jesus Christ has already come and gone. You can even go to the Scriptures of other religions and read that. He really was here. Everybody knows it. People's interpretations of who he was is different, but we already know he was here. So Charles Manson, guess what? You ain't him. But I don't think Charles Manson hears anything like you say. He ain't hearing nothing. His conscience, he has spent too many years of the practice of ignoring God that it's natural for him. That's a part of who he is. He can't hear nothing. That would be a miracle. That would be God intervening if Charles Manson was to come to God. That would be a miracle. So, I have a note here that you should also highlight this verse, all three verses, so that when someone asks you why it is that God spoke to the children of Israel but does not speak to us the same way anymore, you can direct them to this verse so that you can say to that person that prior to the flood, God was so frustrated with us that he said, he does come to a point where he's like, I'm done talking. I'm done talking. Now once he sent Jesus Christ, obviously, that was our advocate. So that's why he doesn't boom to us and have conversations like he did with Moses. But because we have Jesus Christ and we have to go through Christ to get to God. Go ahead.
They also didn't have this either.
That's true. Yes. So he was the teacher. He was letting them know. And then it was being recorded as it was. But we still had the good line through Seth and through Enoch. And a man decided to cross the lines. So it's important that we show the flood was... And here's another reason why God did not have rage. God was not this being that just was so angry with things that he lost control of himself and decided that he was just going to wipe things out. Okay? He did the reason for the 120 years is, this is an example. This is foundational, and you should underline it and you should highlight it because it's a foundation of God's long suffering. When the Bible tells us that God is long suffering, 120 years worth. Because he was ready to destroy the planet right then and there. But he's like, here's 120 years. If somebody can get themselves right in 120 years, okay. But nobody did. Moses was loyal. Moses followed the instructions. But he gave 120 years. And that is God's long suffering. And we can look at this and we can see the patience of God, as disgusted that he was with the free will choices of man. He still gave them, I mean, how many centuries have preachers been sitting in the pulpit talking about the end is nigh? They've been doing it for centuries, right, Brother Dave? The end is nigh, the end is nigh, the end is nigh. Can you imagine Moses?
They're doing it still yet.
Moses is walking around saying, the flood is coming, the flood is coming, the flood is coming. Just like preachers today are saying, the end is nigh, the end is nigh, the end is nigh. Everybody's talking about preachers who preach that message, that you're all lunatics. People were saying the same thing of Noah. When he's talking about the flood, you're a nutbag. There ain't no flood coming. You know? And nobody believed it. But here's the thing. That flood came.
120 years it took. He did that
Yeah.
for 120 years.
Yeah. And I wonder that when it was raining and that water was rising and Noah and his sons and his wives were safe inside that ark, I'm wondering what the people were thinking. Did they want a second chance with Noah? Did they want to get on that ark? Did they want to save themselves? When you're having a conversation with people who don't believe that the end is coming, ask them that question. What are you going to feel like when you're the witness to the end of the world? Because there were a whole bunch of people that were a witness to the slowness. I mean, think about it. 40 days and 40 nights. It had to rain. We're talking about water that covered mountains. There was nowhere to hide. You couldn't climb high enough to get out of that water. And even if you made it to the top of Mount Arafat, one of the tallest mountains in the world, it still got you. That just bought you more time to think about the fact that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And this is your fate. I think about that. They considered him crazy. I'm just wanting to finish my thoughts here, brother, because I don't want to have to go back to it. It was too late for them, and this would be a fantastic verse to share with someone who doesn't understand that the world filled with people who are thinking that the same way a non-believer is thinking today, and then one day you wake up and it's too late. My wife just recently said to me that I worked an overnight on Saturday, and I didn't make it home on time because I was doing paperwork, so I just kept on working. I stayed at work until I got done. And when she woke up, I wasn't there. And she knew I should have been there. And she had seen some things that made her think that I did come home, but I did it before I left. She just didn't notice it. So when she woke up and she went downstairs and she saw that stuff, she thought I had came home, but I was. She looks at me. She goes, "I thought you were raptured." And I said, "That's a shame." And she was like, "What are you talking about? That's a shame." I said, "Because if I was raptured and you weren't with me, that's a shame." And she's like, "Yeah, okay," because I'm pretty sure she'll be with me. But think about it. That's a thought.
Oh yeah.
There are people who are not taking this seriously. And one day they're going to wake up and they're going to see some of us are gone. And then what? And then what?
That'd be catastrophic in itself. Just imagine somebody flying a jet, running a boat,
Yeah,
whatever.
absolutely. All right, so we're going to take an hour or so.
Great.
That's great.
5 minutes, we'll start service at 11 o'clock. Good job, brother.
Hey, Bill. How are you? Doing all right. Late this morning. Was on the way here from Sunday school. Had a few calls.
I was going to say the Funky Brook down.
Yeah, pretty much. We had to turn around and go back the other way.
It's still actually feels better.
How are you?
So I'm excited.
All right. Yeah.
Laugh out loud.
How you doing?
My new job or something.
Part of it wasn't that specific.
How are you? My name's Dave Atkins.
Always one of
I'm Pastor Emeritus.
my-
Yes. Retired.
Oh, I'm sore.
God bless you, Dave Atkins.
No, you didn't. My leg. I played softball Friday night. First time in,
Oh, I gotta go use
last time I really played softball, I think I
Okay, let me help you out here. They're getting older.
With some babies.
Oh, yeah.
And it keeps, let me help you out some more. You get it.
Oh,
And then if I didn't have him explain, you go talk to your grandpa.
Oh, no, I can walk barely.
Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome back. I remember you from Sunday. Good morning. Sister?
I seen that. Morning, how you doing?
I'm fine.
Yeah, I seen you come in, but Dave up there, he's like, is that somebody new? I said, I'm thinking. He said, 2 days from last week, and they bring another one back. There you go. That's gonna be such a good group. So I wish you everything.